I got to be the person that was the handler of Greg Semenza. Greg Semenza won the 2019 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. And yeah, so I showed up to his lab and I got to watch him call his mom and tell her that he won the Nobel Prize. Each of his kids called and he talked to them. I got to see Peter Agre, who was another Nobel laureate, come in and congratulate him. And I'm sitting here taking mini videos on my phone to try to capture all these little intimate moments and send them back to Brian so he can edit them quickly and tweet them out.
We're coming up on a year when I decided that I wanted to do this podcast. I wanted to share my network with the world. During this time, I've learned a lot from so many people. I've even been blessed to get closer with people just from having the conversation on this podcast, and that translate into ongoing friendships. Well, when I first started this, I had a list of people. My guest on today's episode is somebody who was at the top of that list. It's actually the first person in the history of breaking through glass ceilings who I currently work with. Sure, I've had Chanapa, Ashley, Brittany, former co-workers of mine who I met at the great place of John Hopkins Medicine. But today I bring in who I deem the most valuable player on our team, the world's best science writer, the world's best communicator of the scientific content that is being put into the world. She also plays the role a lot of times as my work therapist, and she's one of my work best friends, and that is the one and only Dr. Vanessa McMains. You'll find out how Vanessa went from being a bench scientist to a science communicator, how she's seen how our department has evolved throughout the years. So that's enough of me talking, ladies and gentlemen. I'm excited for you to hear this episode. So ladies and gentlemen, here is my conversation with Dr. Vanessa McMains. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, I have a special guest this week. She is one of the most smartest people I know. I've never hesitant to say that. I even said that in a bar while we was at a conference. And that is the one and only Dr. Vanessa McMains. Vanessa, how you doing today?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm, as much as we expected, it's still you know better than anybody. You being the first person who I currently work with on a day-to-day basis. So we've gone from practically seeing each other Monday through Friday, unless one of us had a work from home day, to pretty much talking on the phone or text every day. So you can imagine how things have been.
Yep.
So appreciate you coming on. It's time for the world to hear your story. They seen the tweets, they seen the photos, especially of me dragging you to wrestling.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was about a year ago. As we record this, it's what they call Survivor Series season, which is always around Thanksgiving. Have you accidentally tuned in since you went to the show?
I have not accidentally tuned in. I have caught commercials and I've been like, I know that guy. that guy's related to The Rock. He's hot.
Well, funny story. Now he's doing this angle where he's claiming himself as the head of the table, and he's a bad guy now. If you remember last year, he had just came back. I think I told you, just came back from beating leukemia. So now he's the champion, and he's I think they're building where we're going to get Rock versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, which would be like the ultimate payoff. That's you getting excited because you would watch
that. I would watch that.
So we shall see. But enough about wrestling. It was also funny because I got a chance to go to my first concert, actually, that wasn't gospel music, believe it or not. Well, TLC don't count because that was at Artscape. I think did you go to Artscape that year?
No, I've never been to Artscape.
Okay, so you was off that day.
I was
Mm,
probably sick at home with a migraine.
yeah, we went, Audrey had took us, there for a outing, and, that way we could have a bonding moment, things we used to do in the past, and, so that's why I saw TLC, but the Tool concert was my first concert, and I remember, like, watching the guitars, and then when they finally let us, pull out our phones, I, like, showed my dad. I said, "No, you missed it, like, he was playing one guitar, but then he switched it for another song, and then the other guy was, like, tuning the guitar." Like, to me, that was, like, the most amazing thing, and the music was good.
Yeah, and you got to see Joe's favorite living drum player, and as a drum player yourself, so that was an honor. Danny Carey is iconic.
Yeah, and, it's hard to believe that it was this year. I was actually supposed to go hear Joe play. That was back in January.
Yep.
Yeah, before all hell broke loose. And, I was waiting on my mother that day to get my daughter because I don't think Ariana would have been okay in a bar at
Yeah.
4 years old.
Nah, nah.
Yeah.
That was a thing that, back in the 80s, that was a little bit more accepted, but you also smoked and drank around your kids and
Yeah.
people are better parents now.
Yeah, that's true. That is absolutely true. Um, but you're one of the world's famous science writers. You won't say it, but I will. You went to University of Maryland. What led you to university? Well, you like me started off in community college.
I
So
did.
why community college first? What's your story?
I had no money. I was poor. My mom was a single mom, and my grandparents had helped her out. And then my grandfather passed away when I was just getting into high school, and my grandmother became bitter and no longer wanted to help my mom out. My mom didn't get child support because my father got locked up when I was 10 years old, and she she started dating a guy, but they both were making very little money, so they couldn't help me. Um, and I had really good grades and I had some scholarships, but it wasn't enough to pay for a 4-year degree. So I decided to enroll in community college, and because I knew I had gotten a Pell Grant, because back then, if you were poor enough, you could get a Pell Grant. I think that's not an option anymore because the government cut that. So that ended up paying for the first 2 years of schooling. And I knew I was going to transfer to University of Maryland because I wanted to go to a 4-year university. And I was going to go to a state school because it was in state. And I grew up in Maryland because in state tuition is cheaper. And yeah, while at University of Maryland, I mean, I always knew I wanted to be a scientist. I just didn't know what kind of scientist. I kind of wanted to be a zoologist until a college professor told me that that wasn't really a job. I mean, it was a job, but I wasn't going to make any more than $25,000 a year, and I would probably have to go to California to train. Um, and I wasn't about moving because then, back at 16 years old, I was already dating my husband. Still together 23 years later.
That's awesome.
um, we I ended up transferring to University of Maryland and majored in cell and molecular biology and genetics. I got to change. I had to choose a major, and I literally chose it because it sounded hard. Is that terrible? I was like, that sounds hard. I want to do that.
Usually it's the opposite.
I know. So I started working in a lab in my while I was in college, and realized that yeah, I wanted to become a scientist. And in the lab, I had some great mentors, and they were like, "Well, you can get your master's, but you'll be $60,000 in debt, or you can go get your PhD, and they'll pay you to go to school, and you won't be in any debt." And I was like, "Ding, ding, ding! That sounds like the path for me." So I took a year off after getting my bachelor's so that I could work in the lab and save up money. And so I could apply to grad schools because I tried applying my senior year and it was just too much to keep my grades up and apply at the same time. And I was also working two jobs at the time because I was putting myself through school. So took a year off, saved up all my money while living at home, and that all that money was used for a down payment on a house that was slightly closer than where my parents lived. Um, to a grad school, and I got accepted into the graduate partnership program through the National Institutes of Health. From now on, I'm going to call them NIH because that's a lot. That's a mouthful. It was a partnership program with Johns Hopkins University Biology Department and NIH. And so basically, I took my classes and did teaching at Johns Hopkins, but then I went to the lab at NIH in Bethesda. And about midway through, 3 years in, I decided that maybe I didn't actually want to work in a lab and be a scientist in that sense, in the traditional bench scientist anymore. So I began exploring other careers. Um, I wasn't, yeah, I'm kind of long winded. I'm just
You're
telling my
good.
whole story.
I mean,
So,
this is about you, so.
all right. So stop me when you have another question, but otherwise, I'm just going to keep going on my journey. um, so basically, I started exploring other career options, like what can you do with your PhD? And I'm also not a quitter, so I wasn't going to quit after 3 years and drop out with a master's. I was like, no, we're going to finish this, and then we'll find something else to do. Um, so weirdly enough, science writing and science communication was the last thing that I decided I wanted to do. I tried everything else before I went to exploring that career option. And you might be surprised by this, Brian. It's because I hated writing. And my job is a science writer, so that seems like totally uh
That's different.
yeah. But what I realized is all throughout school, this means like middle school, elementary school, high school, college, um, English class was writing, and English class was always reading books about people who died or had hard lives. And then you had to write about that. And I always hated the books we had to read at school, except when we got to read things like Beowulf or some Shakespeare. But everything was about like death and people dying and having hard lives. And so it was hard to write because I didn't like the topics I was writing about. And so I sort of like had this Pavlovian response where, because I hated English, I thought writing sucked.
Mhm.
And it turns out that I started like dipping my toe in the water and trying to write about science. And I really liked it. And I realized that my whole feeling this way was because of English class. And what really mattered was writing about things I cared about and liked instead of being forced to write something for school. um, so while in graduate school, I started volunteering. I volunteered for a couple outlets at NIH, such as the NIH Catalyst, which is their like campus magazine, and I volunteered for NIH Research Matters, which is a it's an outlet that writes press releases. But let me back up there, because NIH writes press releases for each of their institutions, but they kind of write them at the level for other scientists. They don't write them for the public to understand. And so NIH Research Matters would break down the press release into English so that normal humans could understand where their taxes were going and what kind of cool stuff the government was doing with their money. And then I got accepted into a program through AAAS, which is the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And it's a mass media fellowship where they placed me for the summer at the Chicago Tribune. And while there, I got to write all kinds of cool stories. And that was a fascinating experience. Side note, I was terrified and didn't want to go to Chicago because this little country bumpkin, although, I travel to Baltimore every day for work, I live in the suburbs / country. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to send me to Chicago. It's a city. Ew, I have to live in the city. I hate cities. I went to Chicago and fell in love with it. I loved it
Mhm.
and realized that, you know, it's not like that. But
Now, did you live
eventually,
inside the city, at the actual city, or were you on the outskirts?
no, I lived in the city. I lived in Hyde Park. It was
Okay.
amazing. I was 1 block away from this little organic grocery store, and I was 1 block away from like 15 different restaurants. I was 3 blocks away from um, the water, so I could just walk down there to Lake Michigan. Um, I was like half a mile away from the university, and the university right on its campus had like a Frank Lloyd Wright house, and it had this free museum that you just walk in and they ask for a donation, and it was all these ancient Egyptian antiquities, like gorgeous stuff, like Indiana Jones stuff.
Oh wow. Yeah, because you remember when we were there in the end of 2018, I was just shocked. First of all, so much space. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, you think a city like growing up on the East Coast and going to different cities, obviously growing up in Baltimore, but going to Atlanta, New Orleans, and New York cities, you see everything's so tight. In Philly, everything's like so clustered together. But there, I'm like, oh wow, like they actually have
Yeah.
space in the area.
It's they tell me it's because it's a planned city. They planned it, and when they planned it, they put green space everywhere, and that just makes it so much more tolerable to be in a city when, like, yeah, you have several blocks with buildings smashed up against each other, but you go in and there's like green spaces and parks everywhere,
Hmm.
and it's just a place to go. Everybody would be in the parks grilling. I met all kinds of people there. They're nice in the Midwest. Um, but yeah, that was tangent. Back after that, let's see, I came back and I wrote up my dissertation and defended it, and then I was looking for a job, and I was looking for a job as a science writer, a science communicator, at the end of 2009, beginning of 2010, right in the middle of the Great Recession. And I had applied for some things, but then there were just no job opportunities available. I couldn't find anything. And so this was a good nugget of what to do when you can't find a job. I went through everybody who I had ever connected with on LinkedIn and figured out, just told them what I was doing and asked them if they knew of anything. And one person I reached out to was Audrey Huang, who's our old boss.
Hmm.
She was my grant writing professor my second year of grad school. And keep in mind, this is like 6.5, 7 years later. Um, she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm hiring for a position. It's not 100% writing; it's doing some website work and um, putting out some newsletters. But I'll let you write a little bit, and um, if you're interested. And when can you start?"
Wow.
So the rest is history. I've been at Hopkins now for a decade, and I've been in three different positions there.
All right, so you speak to Audrey. Um, what was the process like? And you were you intimidated as far as you said you didn't like writing? So was you intimidated, or now are you more comfortable with writing?
Oh, I was definitely more comfortable with writing by then. I had probably been writing for a couple years by then. I had been writing at the Chicago Tribune. That was kind of intimidating. You write a draft and you're like, what is this like super duper famous writer going to think of what I wrote? And of course, some things they would edit very lightly, other things they would tear apart, but I always had really good editors who told me why they edited things the way they did, so that helps you improve your own writing.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I had been writing for a couple years by then. Um, what was kind of intimidating was the fact that I had no experience doing websites and no experience doing any sort of HTML formatting. Um, but Audrey knew as a PhD that we can pick up things quickly. And so she wasn't worried about that. And she basically sat down with me and showed me the things. And I figured it out just by messing around. Um, so it helps to have someone who has confidence in your ability. I think we did that a lot for a lot of the people we hired, back when I used to have a say in who we hired. We would hire people who we knew were quick learners and could pick things up, like Archie. Like Archie may not have had any sort of website experience, but we knew she was quick and on the ball, and she would pick it up. So we didn't need somebody, because even some people who have that experience, if they're not a quick learner, like, they're not going to be as good as an employee in the long run, right?
Correct.
um so yeah, it's all about finding the right kind of person, and maybe they don't have those specific skills, but if you think they're the right kind of person that can pick up on those skills,
Now,
then
so now what can you describe and shout out to Audrey if she's listening. Can you describe compare and contrast her teaching style versus her style as a manager? Because a lot of people ask me, but it was a different time because I was in high school, so I was nowhere near an adult. So you had her as an adult, and you worked under her as an adult.
Um, she was, well, when she hired me, it was just on the basic science team, it was me and one other writer. And she sat down and trained me how to do everything. And I would either watch her or she would walk me through. And um, yeah, she was just straightforward, just the facts, ma'am, no bullshit. But she was always very available when I needed her. And yeah, she's also a very good editor. So she would also explain why she did things and how to change things. Yeah, I think um, her responsibilities were a lot more narrow. So she was also less stressed out. Um, so I don't think she was as tough as she was later, but she also had way more people to manage. And yeah. So I guess initially, probably for my first year and a half or so, she she was just letting me learn and figure things out, and there wasn't like the Audrey that you know and love, which is the okay, we're gonna do this project, and I know you feel that you aren't capable of it, but we're gonna push you out of your comfort zone, and you are just gonna go all in, and everybody freaks out. Oh, this is we can't do this, and then she pushes us to be better and do things that we never imagined we could do. Um, I don't think that it was it was it was like that until a little later.
Yeah. So now you at Johns Hopkins. What was it like to go back? You studied there, and now you're back there working. Can you talk about your feelings and thoughts and how much it meant to you to be able to go back?
Um, it honestly, it was kind of like coming full circle in one sense, but in another sense, it was very different because I was at the Homewood campus and we are working for the people in the East Baltimore Hospital campus. So it was very different in that sense. It wasn't like any of my professors that taught me were any of the ones that I interacted with. Um, but at the same time, it felt good to go back to that Johns Hopkins name. They were my alma mater, and I would be working with them. So there was a certain comfort level in knowing that I was there, if that makes sense.
Hmm. And can you just talk about what it's like to be a science writer and more so, communicate in? Because a lot of times, one thing I always brag about is when we are working together and we have these researchers, they talk above my head, which isn't hard to do, but you
Oh,
can
stop.
but you can like bring them down quickly. I always bring up longitudinal study. You told me. So
Overtime, overtime.
yeah, and it was just like you just like so fast. And I know for me personally, as I had to transition my job and write more as opposed to just tweeting and doing videos, actually writing these papers, it's almost like you can in the middle of your sleep just translate. So can you just talk about like just doing that for thousands of people reading online?
Yeah, so there's some history to this. And the first is like when I started working in a lab as an undergrad, I started reading the papers that my lab put out, and it literally took me a half an hour to go through the abstract. And I had to sit there and write, like cross out words, like Google every other word, write in the margins, and like actually translate it so that I could understand it. And then as a student, you watch all these researchers give these PowerPoint presentations, and the talks that you remember are the ones you can understand because they actually break it down for you. Whereas you would see these like big name people and they would come in like, oh, everybody knows my stuff. And they wouldn't even give like an introduction as to why this was important and totally just run into full science like, no, why does this matter? And even what organism they're working with. Just we're going to throw some ABCs at you and just figure that you know it. And I got nothing out of those talks because it was like, why am I even here? There's no like studying the stage. There's nothing. Um, so I swore when I gave a talk, I was not going to be this like pompous dick and make sure that nobody could understand my stuff, because I thought that was just arrogant and it wasn't helpful. The other thing is although I am a scientist with a PhD, all my friends are blue collar workers, and my mom doesn't have a degree. So when I come home and talk with my friends, it's like, well, what do you do today? And so I'd have to break it down. Now, my husband is kind of an engineer, but he works with like electronics and robots and stuff. So when I talk to him, he doesn't understand the biology if I were to say it like I was speaking to another scientist. So in my day-to-day interactions with friends and family, it's having to break things down. So I was kind of used to doing it that way. Um, and so it kind of became second nature to me, I guess, maybe due to my surroundings and wishing to be clear to people. I know I even gave a Gordon conference talk in Santa Barbara, and they invited my mentor, my PhD mentor, to go speak. And he was like, "Nah, your project's more interesting, Vanessa. Why don't you go give this talk?" And these are talks that usually only the PI of the lab, the head honcho who runs the lab, gives. And so I gave a talk about my work. And later we went on this whale watching tour with the whole conference group. And I had people coming up to me and they were like, "Oh, so how long have you been in your lab? How long have you worked on your project?" And um, they were fishing for answers, and I was giving them to them. But what I didn't realize is they were actually trying to see if they could come work in my lab because they thought I ran my own lab. And here I am going, I'm like a third year graduate student. I can't hire you in my lab. I'm definitely not a PI. How old do I look? They were like, "Well, you look young." And I was like, "Well, why do you think I run my own lab?" And they're like, "Because the way you presented your talk, it was so understandable. And only someone who's an expert in that field could actually present it understandably." And I was like, pretty sure that's not the case. It's just a fact that that's like one of my goals, is to make sure that you understood it, because nobody's going to enjoy me speaking about my science unless I get the message across about what it's about. And so I sort of that was instilled into me early, and that's I think that's why I am the way I am, if that makes sense. Not even like what I do today, but
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Now, you seen let's play see how far this goes. That's an insider joke. When you nah, we not gonna get in trouble because I mean we I was just joking. But you've seen a transition in the team throughout the years. You've seen, for lack of a better word, it go from experienced writers and experienced colleagues to people who come in fresh out of college. Can you just talk about why you think, besides yourself being there, I'll say it, you won't, but besides yourself being there, why you think that's allowed a certain level of success to be maintained?
I think I didn't really have this understanding of things until I worked under Audrey and Marin. And that is, you need a diverse workforce. And by diverse, that means like people from different backgrounds, people from different age groups, people with different life experiences. Um, because everybody has different talents and different experience in life that they can bring to the table. And I'll tell you, young people fresh out of college, if you pick the right one, they are super savvy on the technology. They can pick up things like fast, and they can learn things fast. You can give them a program and be like, figure this out. Um, Whereas like I've noticed, like I could do that when I was hired a decade ago, and I could probably still do it now, but not nearly as well as our newbies. I'm starting to get old, so that quick technology doesn't kick in so fast. Um, it's important to have um, people from everywhere. Everybody's different talents and different backgrounds bring everything to the table. It's important to have um, people who want to be writers. It's important to have people who have other skills. Like you were the master at video and social media, and we needed that in order to expand our outreach to our audiences, because what we were doing by just doing press releases and such, like, isn't the only way to reach people. And we needed to break into new media. This is the new age, and so we need you for that. We could try, probably struggle through it and do a terrible job, but your expertise is totally needed. um, we I mean, Marin comes from a what do you call that? A PR firm, which is very different from a science writer that's a former scientist. So I know how to talk to the scientists, whereas she's more like, she can deal a lot with like the business aspects of things. And yeah, it helps to have people from all different ways of lives and backgrounds and with different talents. It makes the best team.
Yeah, I
I
will say.
think that I think individually, people can do, like, a certain amount of work, but then when you have people with such various backgrounds, you can bring more ideas and then you can lean on each other. And I feel like the output is exponential compared to what each individual human can do.
Yeah, I can say, I've told people on record that, it's the greatest job I've had. And that's coming from somebody who essentially worked a dream job at ESPN. And it's mainly because of the team environment, coming in. The first couple of months was like, I was struggling because I felt, say it dumb. I'm like, I was given like YouTube videos and it's like, watch this video and write a tweet for it. I could do it now, but at the time I couldn't. I didn't understand the science and a lot of stuff. Eventually you stick around it long enough and stick around people like you and Michael and Rachel who've been doing this, it starts to rub off on you and you start to understand. Like, and the ongoing joke when I would mess up something with Audrey would be, well, now I see why you failed or something. And I
Did
would
she
tell her,
really say that?
no, it's actually the other way around. No, the other, in all fairness, but the other way around was like, you see why I failed your class. And she was like, oh, Brian, stop. you know, um, but the cool part is that you do get to learn stuff, but the family setting. So because you think about work, you spend more time with your colleagues than your household prior COVID. So, and even now in some cases, because I can be buried in work, and then afterwards it's like, sheesh. And then you got a little. Well, I got a little 6-year-old or 5-year-old and an 11-year-old running around, but it's been amazing when you what's been the most rewarding experience you had? You've worked with, some essential legends in the business in their field. Shout out to Dr. Aaron Mikos, um, and Dr. Roger Blumenthal. You've worked with some legends. What's been probably your most rewarding experience?
My most rewarding experience. This is so this is so sad because it's not even my beats. But when I started, a decade ago, one of my jobs was to plan for the eventual announcement that we would win a Nobel Prize. And so I had to create this whole project plan, which involved our whole department. And I did that for 5 years, and then I handed over the reins to someone else to do that. And there's been a couple of people who have done that since then. But then eventually, what ended up happening is we won a Nobel Prize. And I got to be the person that was the handler of Greg Semenza. Greg Semenza won the 2019 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. And yeah, so I showed up to his lab and I got to watch him call his mom and tell her that he won the Nobel Prize. Each of his kids called and he talked to them. I got to see Peter Agre, who was another Nobel laureate, come in and congratulate him. And I'm sitting here taking mini videos on my phone to try to capture all these little intimate moments and send them back to Brian so he can edit them quickly and tweet them out. Um, and it was ensuring that he got to eat that day and that he got the chance to take a bathroom break, which
You know, the
people don't think about. And then the other thing was like, apparently him and his lab had no idea that you're supposed to have a champagne toast, which is a thing. And so I had to send his lab mates out to go to the liquor store as soon as it opened to pick up a couple bottles of champagne so they could do the champagne toast. And
And
I'm thinking,
what
if
time
I
did you
wasn't
get to his
there, they
lab?
wouldn't have had a champagne toast. Who would have? How did they not know this?
What time did you get to his lab?
It was like 7:30 or something. The
Okay.
funny thing was, though, was the last year that I had handled preparing for the Nobel Prize, I had to call a couple of the people and just tell them, like, just call them at their lab and be like, hey, just a heads up, call Audrey if you find out any that you won, and we'll enact the press conference and all those things. And Greg Semenza was the only one who answered his phone. Everybody else, like, either talked to an assistant or had to leave a message. And he was like, sure, Vanessa, like, I'm going to win the Nobel Prize. Okay, stay in your little kooky world. And,
Take me back to that morning. So I'll go that morning. It's what 5:50 ish. I get a call from Vanessa Wasta. Shout out to Vanessa.
oh,
And
I didn't find out from the phone tree. Every year I log on to Twitter and watch it live.
okay, yeah, so because like I'm sitting there, and so here's the funny thing: the first year I find out about this Nobel, that was 2016, and the preparation. So I go to sleep, and I remember, if you remember Brady, who used to work with us. Brady was a huge Chiefs fan. I never forget we was talking about because the Chiefs were playing the Steelers that Sunday night, and I don't know why I have this random part of my memory, but I said to Brady, I said, and the Chiefs weren't good like they are now. They was okay. And I said, hey man, you probably have to go to sleep during the game while your team plays. And he's like, yeah, well, I'll probably DVR, something like that. That's how the conversation was. So I remember going to sleep early that year, no win. The next year I went to sleep early, no win. So then the next year, all right. So that year, I said, you know what? We're not going to win. There was a WWE pay-per-view the night before, and I watched the pay-per-view, did a post show. So mind you, I didn't go to sleep till about 1. And then I hear the phone, and as soon as I heard it, I said, we don't want. And so, the phone tree, like you said, gets activated. For those who don't know, we win. Somebody calls, it's a phone line, a phone tree. So you said you were up live watching. Um, did
And that
you
that that didn't mean up. That meant I was sitting in the dark on my
okay.
phone, Twitter, and my husband was laying there snoozing his alarm. And as soon as I saw it, because they said it in, like, they read it in Swedish.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think they read it in Swedish first, and then they announce it. But because they say Greg Semenza, I was like, oh fuck, we won. Joe's like, what? And he's like, you're not excited? I was like, I have to go to work right now. And he's like, oh. And I was okay. I was excited that we won, but I am not a morning person. And the longer I can stay in bed, the better. I am not functional in the morning. So
I
I will
think
grumble at anything that takes me out of bed, no matter how exciting it is. Just let me sleep.
well, I think by the time I could read your tone through your messages. By the time, I guess all the toasting happened, you were on your midday train. You was on
Oh,
your
the whole day, once I, like, got there, once I got in the car, it was so exciting, like,
Mhm.
and then once I got there, like, we waited around for like a half an hour, us all, like, it was me and Karen Nickin, who was gonna write she is gonna write a feature story for him. And it was oh, the photographer, I can't even remember his name, but he usually works for the undergrad
Will,
institute. um Not Keith, the other one,
Will, Will.
Will. And Will's a cool guy. And
Yeah.
we were just all sitting there chatting and waiting for Dr. Semenza to come. And I don't know, I ran on adrenaline that whole day. It was so exciting. I felt high off of endorphins. It was great.
I know for me, I was happy that you were in the lab, knowing that all the work you had put in, um, and you could see it was like you said, it was exciting because it was like, oh man, we've won. Now we got to get up and work. But just to see, I saw like Vanessa and Marin, they brought their children, and I say, I probably should have brought Jonathan to this. I didn't think of that, and I've never worked at the World Series or Super Bowl, NBA Finals, but I've live tweeted it. Definitely the NBA Finals for ESPN. I was in the control room when Steph Curry and them won their first championship. But the Nobel Prize was just different because it's like this like really impacts the world. Like sports is sports, this entertainment, but this impacts the world. And I remember texting my parents like, "Yeah, I gotta go to work. We went. One of our doctors won the Nobel Prize." It was like, "Congratulations!" I'm like, "I didn't win, but okay." And he was like super awesome to sit there and just like take pictures with all of us.
Yep. And I even when I got there, I was like, "See, I told you were going to win." He's like, "You did. You did." Like he remembered that conversation. I hadn't worked with him for 5 years, but he remembered that conversation.
How hard was it to let go doing so much basic science, knowing that's where you started?
So, it wasn't because I got to in my new position when I had applied for senior media rep, um, I applied then because I knew what beats or departments were being vacated. And I knew those departments had a lot of basic science going on, but the person who had previously covered it didn't understand basic science. So a lot of those stories didn't get told. And so I was okay with it. I get to cover the coolest stuff. I cover everything with the brain. I get to cover the psychedelic research. I get to cover the pot, the magic mushrooms, um, all the neurodegenerative diseases, all the mental illnesses. I cover cardiology. Um, Honestly, the cardiology researchers are some of the best people. Like they're just like good people. Um, and honestly, like the heart wasn't necessarily one of my favorite things, but like because of the people and the researchers and the faculty and the fun times that you and I have going to the American Heart Association meetings, like it's very rewarding.
I was going to ask you that. How has going to AHA like influenced that? Because, like you said, it's so much fun, and yeah, we get to go eat pizza, eat cheesesteaks, go to wrestling, go to concerts. But how much fun and like how much has that conference influenced your love for your beat?
It's influenced it a lot. Like, and it's also like a chance to just do something different and us like me use my talents on the ground to translate in the moment. And I know marketing has wanted to take some of the other people from marketing who don't have that science writer background and send them there. But I don't think they would be able to cover the breadth of research that goes on there because they're just going to pick the things that are like surface level understanding without like not anything that requires like a deep dive to kind of understand. And I love the thrill of like having to do it fast and run around and like just sit there and corner the person and be like, okay, tell me about your stuff. All right, this is how we're going to have to explain it so that other people understand it. Let's
Mhm.
translate it and let's tell it in this order. And these are the questions I'm going to ask. And then, all right, let's get it, go. And then you and I go and sit in a hallway or sit on a bus or sit at a table or sit there eating deep dish pizza, editing and tweeting out videos.
We've done everywhere. Yeah, that's the thing. I was taught shoot today, edit today, post today. So when if it's an opportunity, take it too long when the software is right there. If you can translate it, the faster we get it done, the better. And now I mean they got filters where if you can apply those filters and use that template. Um COVID-19 strikes, we're home. How has that impacted you as far as doing, promoting the research of the head and the heart?
um, I mean, well, let's see. Honestly, we had to roll back on promoting a lot of our things. There was some things. There were times when the institution decided it wasn't going to do press releases unless there were COVID stories because COVID is what the institution was focused on. So I had to put a lot of things on the back burner. And also just the work, like Johns Hopkins is like a powerhouse when it comes to doing COVID research. We are the world leader, I have to say. Um, and so there's a reason why, we focused a lot on COVID. Um, and it's it it's gratifying knowing that like what we say and do actually plays a role, and we're communicating with the world is listening right now. Whereas like before, the world didn't have to listen. They could just tune in if they were interested in a specific topic. But this is like a world issue. um, so that is gratifying, and it has helped me feel important that what I'm doing actually serves a purpose, as opposed to like me. I just want to communicate science. I want everybody to know how cool science is. It's like a no, what we're doing, like, and the messaging we're sending out actually impacts people's lives, and a lot of people's lives, not just like a small niche. Um,
Have you been the go-to person in your family when it comes to COVID?
no, weirdly enough, but I am the go-to person on social media. When as anybody in my social media circle has a question, they're like, Vanessa, have you seen this video? What do you think of it? Or like, can you debunk this for me? Or is this correct? A lot of people have sent things to me to ask me to see if they're legit or not.
Mhm.
Um, my family tended to, my mom asked me some weird stuff. Um, One time when I was getting she hasn't asked me anything in a while, but one time when I was getting my PhD, I was in a lab, and she was like, "Oh my God, Vanessa, I hear, there are these, there's this fungus and it's killing all the frogs around the world. What are you gonna do about it?" And I was like, "Mom, I work on amoebas." And she's like, "Well, there's this do you know about this fungus?" I'm like, "Yeah, Mom, I know about the fungus." She's like, "Well, like, what's it called?" I was like, "Chytria." And she was like, "Wait." Well, and asking me all these things about it. And I was actually able to hold a conversation with her and tell her a lot about it. The only reason I knew about it was because the guy in the fruit fly lab next door to me had previously done his PhD research on Chytria in tree frogs in like the Amazon. And I had just been talking to him. But then I'm like, Mom, why would you think I know about this fungus in these frogs? And yes, I happen to know about the fungus in the frogs, but it was just really random because she just expects me to know everything about everything. And I don't. But sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know, Mom. I don't know who would know this,
Yeah, that's awesome. I gotta ask you this question before we get out of here. It's actually your question.
Oh,
Because for anybody who's applied, and I think
I
I'm
know, I know, I know. Can I ask the question? Can I ask the
yeah,
question?
you can go ahead. Let me set it up though, because people. So every time we have new candidates for a position, Vanessa has a certain question she asked them, and I don't think you asked me the question. I believe if you did, I wouldn't have had an answer. I know I would have got stumped. My question was just how you feel about Johns Hopkins. I remember specifically you asking me that. But yeah, but you go ahead, ask yourself your question and answer it.
Ask myself my question. My question is, if you could be any animal, what would you be and why? Um, my husband would say I'm a turtle because he thinks that I look like a turtle and I'm lazy and move slow like a turtle. My husband swears I'm the laziest person ever, which is ironic because if you told that to anybody I work with, they would be like, Vanessa's the least laziest person I know.
Least laziest person on the job.
um, um, I probably maybe would be a dog, and not just like a wild dog. I would be like a lazy dog that like I just sit around and you feed me and pet me, and I would be happy, and I would just wag my tail. A golden retriever. That's what I want to be.
Oh, that's awesome. I- oh man. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing with the world what I already know and blessed to know. And obviously, I appreciate everything that you continue to help me with. Hey, it's almost 5 years, believe it or not.
Half a
um
decade.
I, I know, and it's funny because I was only supposed to be there 2 months, and then I specifically remember you saying, "Wait, well, you're not leaving. We were supposed to have a lunch for you leaving, but now I found out you're not leaving. So we're just going to lunch, right? And I was like, yeah, like Audrey decided to keep me. So shout out to Audrey and Marin just for putting together a solid team. And Audrey's like the steel people. She's stolen a
Yeah.
couple.
Oh, yep. I had dinner with one of our former coworkers who is now going to be freelancing for Audrey. She's like, yeah, she stole me too.
Oh wow. Well, that'll do it. Let the people know where they can find you.
Find me. You can find me on LinkedIn, I guess, but please send me a message as to why you're connecting, because I get a lot of random people. Because I cover the psychedelics, I get some people in the Middle East and in Africa trying to sell me magic mushrooms on LinkedIn. And I'm on Twitter at Nessa McMains. That's like my name, but without the VA. Um, I go sporadically active. I'm going to call it sporadically active on there.
Awesome. Vanessa, I definitely appreciate you coming on. This was a lot of fun. And hopefully we don't get in trouble.
I don't
No,
think
we good. We good. That was so much fun. I've been learning a lot from Vanessa these past 5 years, and now hopefully y'all was able to take something from that conversation. Next week, folks, I bring on two powerful women in sports, the CEOs of Up Next sports consulting firm, and that is the one and only Miss Kristen Ross Francis and Miss Celia Newman. So I'm really excited about this episode. Y'all will get an opportunity to learn about Up Next sports consulting. It was earlier this year, Reggie Calhoun was on the show and he is one of their clients. So y'all get to understand why it's important to support women in sports. As you know, I'm a huge advocate of, folks. So thank you for joining me this week. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so. Drop me a 5-star rating. Help me out on iTunes. You know, it's free content. So just help me out. 5 stars goes a long way. Telling your friends go a long way. Thank you so much. And remember, don't let anybody set up a ceiling that you can't break through. This podcast was recorded and edited by B Waters Productions. The music by Hypno Beats. Make sure you follow him at Hypno_Beats with a Z on Instagram.